They say a text message can't save your life. They're lying. It saved mine, along with a whisper from a man whose voice could silence a room of killers. The wine glass trembled in my hand, sending little ripples across the surface of the overpriced Cabernet I couldn't afford. My date, Derek Ashworth, a marketing executive who'd seemed charming online, leaned closer across the candlelit table at Marcello's, one of downtown Philadelphia's most exclusive Italian restaurants. His hand crept toward my knee under the white tablecloth. "You know," he said, his breath hot against my ear, "my apartment's only 10 minutes from here. We could skip dessert." I shifted away, but he followed. The restaurant spun around me, golden light from crystal chandeliers, the murmur of expensive conversations, the clink of silverware against fine china. Everything beautiful. Everything wrong. "I should probably get home," I managed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Early shift tomorrow." His fingers tightened on my knee. "Come on, Natalie. Don't be like that." I fumbled for my phone beneath the table, my heart hammering against my ribs. Derek's smile never wavered, but his eyes had gone flat. Predatory. He'd been pouring my wine all night, always filling it before I could track how many glasses I'd had. The room tilted slightly when I moved my head. Under the table, I typed with shaking fingers. "Dad, this date feels wrong. He's a creep and being inappropriate. Marcello's on Walnut. Please call me so I have an excuse to leave." I hit send and prayed my father would check his phone. He was working the night shift at the warehouse, but maybe... "Who are you texting?" Derek's voice had lost all pretense of charm. "Just my roommate," I lied. "Letting her know when I'll be home." "Put the phone away, Natalie." It wasn't a request. I looked up at him, really looked, and saw something in his expression that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just a bad date. This was danger. That's when I noticed the man 3 tables away. He sat alone, a tumbler of amber liquid untouched before him. While everyone else in Marcello's wore expensive casual clothes, he wore a suit that probably cost more than my car. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a black shirt and no tie. His dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes were fixed on our table. I couldn't have been more than 23. He looked somewhere in his early 40s, with silver threading through the dark hair at his temples, and lines bracketing his mouth that spoke of hard decisions and harder consequences. There was something in the way he held himself, in the careful stillness of his posture, that whispered of coiled violence and absolute control. Every person who passed his table gave him a wide berth. The waitstaff approached, with their heads slightly lowered. Even from across the restaurant, I could feel the weight of his presence like a physical thing. And he was watching Derek touch me with an expression of stone-cold disapproval. "I really need to go," I said, trying to stand. Derek's hand clamped around my wrist. "Sit down. We're not finished." "Let go of me!" "You've been leading me on all night, Natalie. Wearing that dress." His eyes raked over my simple black cocktail dress, the nicest thing I owned, purchased from a thrift store for tonight. "You owe me." The fear crystallized into something sharp and bright. I'd been drugged. I was almost certain now. The room's tilt, the way my thoughts moved through honey, the weakness in my limbs. Derek had put something in my wine, and now he was talking about what I owed him. I yanked my wrist back, but his grip only tightened. Pain shot up my arm. The man in the charcoal suit moved. One moment he was sitting at his table. The next he was standing beside ours, and I hadn't even seen him cross the distance. Up close, he was taller than I'd realized, well over 6 feet, and the air around him seemed to thicken with menace. The lady, he said quietly, his voice carrying a faint Italian accent that made each word sound like cut glass, asked you to let go. Derek looked up, irritation flashing across his face before he registered who was speaking to him. Then his expression changed. The color drained from his cheeks. Mr. Castellano, Derek stammered. We were just... Let go. 2 words, spoken barely above a whisper, but Derek's hand sprang open like he'd been burned. I cradled my wrist against my chest, feeling the throb of bruises already forming. Vincent Castellano, because that had to be who he was. I'd heard the name whispered in certain circles, always with a mixture of fear and respect. Didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply looked at Derek the way you might look at something you'd found on the bottom of your shoe. You will leave, Castellano said. You will go directly to your car. You will drive yourself to the nearest police station, and you will confess what you put in this young woman's wine. He paused. Or I will have my associates ensure that you never threaten another woman again. Do you understand the difference? Derek understood. He was already standing, nearly knocking over his chair in his haste. His hands shook as he threw a handful of bills on the table, nowhere near enough to cover the meal he'd ordered. I'm sorry, he gasped. I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was... She isn't. Castellano cut him off, his voice like a blade. She is simply a woman who deserves not to be assaulted. That should be enough. Now leave before I change my mind about giving you a choice. Derek fled. Actually ran through the restaurant, stumbling between tables while the other diners pretended not to notice. A small, distant part of my mind wondered what they thought of this tableau. The frightened young woman, the aggressive date, the dangerous man who'd intervened. Then Castellano turned those steel gray eyes on me, and my breath caught. Are you hurt? He asked, and his voice had changed. Still quiet, but no longer edged with threat. Almost gentle. I don't... The room spun harder. I gripped the table for support. He put something in my drink, I think. I can't... My knees buckled. Castellano caught me before I hit the floor. His arms were solid, secure, and I found myself pressed against that expensive suit, breathing in cedar and gunpowder, and something darker I couldn't name. Antonio, he called, and a broad-shouldered man in a black suit materialized from somewhere. Bring the car around. Tell Dr. Morrison I'm bringing someone to the house. Now. Yes, sir. My dad... I tried to form coherent thoughts, but they scattered like leaves. I texted him. He'll worry. We'll call him, Castellano said. He lifted me, actually lifted me, and carried me toward the door. What's your father's name? James Brennan. He's... The world was fading at the edges. I'm a waitress. I can't afford whatever this costs. The last thing I heard before darkness took me was his voice, low and fierce. You don't pay for being rescued. You never pay for that. I woke to soft light and softer sheets, my head pounding like a drum line was marching through my skull. For a disorienting moment, I had no idea where I was. This wasn't my cramped apartment with its lumpy futon and water-stained ceiling. This room was enormous, decorated in shades of cream and gold, with furniture that belonged in a magazine spread. You're awake. I turned my head, slowly because it felt like it might fall off, and found Vincent Castellano sitting in an armchair near the bed. He'd removed his suit jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and scattered with scars. He held a cup of coffee, and somehow he made even that look dangerous. Where am I? My voice came out as a croak. My home. Dr. Morrison examined you last night. You were given Rohypnol, the date rape drug. You'll feel the effects for another few hours, but you're going to be fine. He set down the coffee and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Your father is downstairs. I called him from your phone after you passed out. He was concerned. Concerned. That was probably an understatement. My father, a gruff former Marine who'd raised me alone after my mother died when I was 5, would have been beyond frantic. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room tilted. Easy. Castellano was beside the bed in an instant, one hand on my shoulder, steadying me. This close, I could see flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could count the lines that bracketed his mouth. Dr. Morrison left instructions. You need rest, fluids, and time. I have all 3 to offer. I can't stay here. I don't even know you. Something flickered across his face. You know enough. You know I don't hurt women. You know I stopped someone from hurting you. The rest? He shrugged, a minimal movement that somehow conveyed volumes. The rest you'll learn, if you choose to. Why did you help me? The question hung between us. Castellano was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I have a sister, he finally said. Gabriella. She's 24 now, studying architecture in Florence. When she was 20, she went on a date with a man who seemed charming. His jaw tightened. He put something in her drink. She was lucky. Her friends realized what was happening and got her to a hospital. But I wasn't there. I couldn't protect her. He looked at me, and for just a second, I saw past the dangerous exterior to something raw underneath. So when I see a man doing to someone else's sister what was done to mine, he continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, I make sure it stops. Permanently, if necessary. What happened to him? The man who drugged your sister? Castellano's smile was cold enough to frost glass. He had a very unfortunate accident. Fell down some stairs, multiple times, into a basement that locked behind him. He tilted his head. He was found 3 days later. The police ruled it a misadventure. Tragic, really. I should have been terrified. This man was admitting to, at minimum, assault, possibly worse. But all I felt was a fierce satisfaction that someone had made Gabriella's attacker pay. Thank you, I said, for helping me. You already thanked me. Last night, about 7 times before you passed out. There was the ghost of amusement in his voice. You also told me I had very nice eyebrows and asked if I was single. Heat flooded my cheeks. I was drugged. You were honest. He stood, putting distance between us. Your father is waiting. I'll send him up. When you're ready to leave, Antonio will drive you wherever you need to go. Wait! I didn't know what made me say it. Why bring me here? Why not just take me to a hospital? Castellano paused at the door, his broad shoulders outlined against the light from the hallway. Because hospitals ask questions, he said without turning around. They call the police. They create reports and investigations and bureaucracy, none of which would change what happened to you, but all of which would make your life significantly more complicated. He glanced back over his shoulder. And because I wanted to make sure you were safe. My home is very safe, Natalie Brennan. He knew my full name. Of course he did. I had the feeling Vincent Castellano knew everything about everyone who crossed his path. Also, he added, something shifting in his expression, you reminded me of someone. Someone who deserved better than the hand she was dealt. Before I could ask who, he was gone. My father exploded into the room 30 seconds later, his weathered face creased with worry. He crushed me into a hug that made my ribs protest. Jesus, Nat, he breathed into my hair. When I got your text and then couldn't reach you, when that man called from your phone. I'm okay, Dad, I promise. He pulled back, holding me at arm's length to examine me for himself. James Brennan had been a handsome man once. Now he was just tired, worn down by years of factory work and single parenthood, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from never quite having enough. That man downstairs, he said. You know who he is? Vincent Castellano. Do you know what he does? I met my father's eyes. Do you? He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I know men like him. Served with a few in the Marines. They're the ones who do what needs doing when nobody else will. But they're also dangerous, Nat. Men like that, they don't do anything without a reason. He helped me. I know, and I'm grateful. Christ, I'm so grateful I could weep. But gratitude creates debt. And debt to a man like Vincent Castellano? He shook his head. Just be careful, baby girl. That's all I'm asking. I wanted to argue, wanted to say that Castellano expected nothing from me, that he'd helped because it was the right thing to do. But my father had been navigating the ugly realities of the world a lot longer than I had. Maybe he saw things I didn't. Antonio drove us home in a car that probably cost more than my father would make in 5 years. He was polite but distant, his eyes constantly scanning the streets like he expected threats to materialize from the shadows. Maybe, in his world, they did. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, tiny, shabby, but mine. The futon with the broken spring, the kitchenette where the refrigerator hummed like a dying animal, the single window that overlooked a brick wall. After Castellano's mansion, it felt like returning to Earth after floating in space. My father made me tea and sat with me until I fell asleep, his rough hand holding mine the way he'd done when I was little and woke from nightmares. I dreamed of gray eyes and dangerous men who caught falling women. 3 days passed. I went back to work at Rosie's Diner, slinging eggs and coffee to the morning regulars and pocketing tips that never quite added up to enough. My wrist still bore the shadow of Derek's grip, pale green bruises that made my stomach turn every time I caught sight of them. I'd reported it to the police, filed a statement about the drugging, about Derek's assault. The officer taking my report had been professional but skeptical, his eyes saying what his mouth didn't. He said, she said. Hard to prove. Probably won't go anywhere. He was right. Derek Ashworth had hired an expensive lawyer. It was my word against his, and his word came with a pedigree and a bank account that made mine look like pocket change. I tried not to think about it. Tried not to think about how close I'd come to something infinitely worse than bruises. Tried not to think about Vincent Castellano and the way he'd looked at me like I mattered. Then, on the 4th day, Antonio appeared at the diner during my lunch shift. He stood out like a wolf in a petting zoo, expensive suit, visible shoulder holster barely concealed under his jacket, eyes that tracked every person in the room as potential threats. The regulars went quiet. Even Rosie, who'd seen everything in 40 years of running this place, raised an eyebrow. Miss Brennan, Antonio said, approaching my table. Mr. Castellano requests the pleasure of your company for dinner tonight. 8 o'clock. He'll send a car. It wasn't a question. I'm working tonight, I said, very aware of every eye in the diner on us. Mr. Castellano has already spoken with your employer. You've been given the evening off. With pay. Antonio's expression didn't change, but I detected the faintest hint of amusement. He can be very persuasive. I'll bet he can, I thought. And if I say no? Then I'll convey your response to Mr. Castellano, and he'll accept it. Antonio tilted his head slightly. But he would like to see you, Miss Brennan. And I believe you would like to see him. Damn it. He was right. Fine, I said. But I don't have anything appropriate to wear to wherever he's planning to take me. The car will arrive at 7:30. There will be a dress. If it doesn't fit or you don't like it, wear whatever makes you comfortable. Antonio started to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Mr. Castellano doesn't typically extend dinner invitations. You made an impression. After he left, Rosie slid into the booth across from me. Girl, she said, her lined face serious. You playing with fire? I don't know what I'm doing. That man who was just here? He works for Vincent Castellano. And Vincent Castellano... She trailed off, choosing her words carefully. He's not a bad man, but he's not a safe man either. You understand the difference? I did. God help me, I did. The dress arrived at 7:15 in a garment bag that probably cost more than my rent. I opened it with shaking hands and found a deep emerald green cocktail dress. Simple but elegant, with a fabric so soft it felt like water. There were shoes, too, black heels with reasonable height, and they fit perfectly. Of course they did. Vincent Castellano struck me as a man who paid attention to details. I did my makeup with the drugstore cosmetics I could afford, swept my dark blonde hair into something approximating an updo, and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized, someone who looked like she belonged in Castellano's world instead of Rosie's diner. The car arrived precisely at 7:30. Antonio held the door, his face impassive. You look lovely, Miss Brennan. Where are we going? Mr. Castellano's home. He thought you might prefer privacy for this conversation. My heart kicked against my ribs. His home. Alone. With a man I barely knew, whose reputation preceded him like a thunderstorm. But I got in the car. The mansion looked different at night, lit from within like a castle in a fairy tale, all golden windows and shadowed gardens. Antonio led me through a side entrance, down hallways decorated with art that probably belonged in museums, to a dining room that could have seated 20. Vincent Castellano stood by the windows, silhouetted against the night. He'd shed the suit for dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows in that way that did devastating things to a woman's composure. When he turned and saw me, something sparked in his gray eyes. Natalie. My name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the dress. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He crossed to me, moving with that predatory grace that made me hyper-aware of every nerve in my body. You wear it well. We stood there, caught in a moment that stretched like taffy. Then Castellano seemed to remember himself and gestured to the table, set for two with bone china and silver that gleamed in the candlelight. Please, sit. Are you hungry? I was always hungry. Being poor did that to you. Dinner was served by silent staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Each course was more exquisite than the last. Food I couldn't name, prepared by someone who understood cuisine as art. I tried not to look too eager, too grateful, but Castellano noticed everything. You don't have to be polite here, he said quietly. Eat. Enjoy. There's no judgment. So I did, and it was glorious. We talked as we ate, or rather, he asked questions and I answered, slowly relaxing under his steady attention. I told him about my mother's death from cancer when I was 5, about my father raising me alone, working himself to the bone to keep us fed and housed. About my dreams of going to college, becoming a teacher maybe, giving something back. And now? He asked. Now I'm 23, working at a diner, with student loans I can't pay for a degree I never finished. Living the dream. The bitterness in my voice surprised me. Why did you leave school? Dad got laid off 2 years ago. The factory closed. We needed money for rent, for food, I shrugged. For life. So I came home and started working. College can wait. Except it couldn't. That was the lie I told myself. Every year that passed made it harder to imagine going back, made the dream feel more distant. Castellano was quiet, his expression thoughtful. What about you? I asked, emboldened by wine and his attention. How does someone become what you are? His mouth quirked. Carefully. With a great deal of blood and even more regret. He leaned back in his chair. My grandfather came from Sicily with nothing. He built an empire in this city through will and violence. My father inherited that empire and expanded it. I inherited responsibility I never wanted and power I can never escape. Do you want to escape it? Every day. The rawness in his voice shocked me. And never. It's who I am, Natalie. The violence, the control, the fear, it's woven into my DNA. My mother used to say I was born with old eyes that had seen too much, even as a baby. Your mother? Dead 12 years now. Cancer, like yours. He smiled, but there was no happiness in it. Some things kill without caring about money or power. The moment stretched between us, weighted with shared loss. Why am I here? I asked finally. Really here, I mean, not just for dinner. Castellano stood and walked to the windows, his back to me. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because in the 4 days since I last saw you, you've haunted me. Because... He turned, and the expression on his face stole my breath. Because I want to offer you something. And I need you to understand it's an offer, not a demand. You can refuse. You can walk away. Nothing I've done for you comes with strings. What kind of offer? He crossed back to me, close enough that I could smell cedar and danger. I need someone I can trust in my home. Someone to manage the household, oversee the staff, handle the details I don't have time for. It would be a live-in position, your own suite, full salary, benefits. He paused. I'm also in the process of assuming custody of my nephew, my sister Gabriella's son. There was an accident 6 months ago. She and her husband died. Marco is 8 years old and he hasn't spoken since. Pain crossed his face, raw and unconcealed. I don't know how to help him, Castellano continued. I don't know how to be what he needs. But I see the way you are, the kindness in you, the strength. And I think maybe you could reach him when I can't. You want me to be... what? A housekeeper? A nanny? I want you to be safe. I want you to not worry about rent or student loans or whether you'll eat tomorrow. He stopped himself. I want someone in this house who isn't afraid of me. Someone real. The confession hung between us. This is insane, I whispered. I don't know you. I don't know your world. No, but you know enough to understand what I am. And you're still here. He was right. God help me, he was right. I need to think about it. Talk to my father. Of course. Castellano stepped back, giving me space. Antonio will drive you home. Take whatever time you need. But Natalie, his eyes held mine. I'm not going to hurt you. And I won't let anyone else hurt you either. That's a promise. I believed him. My father hit the roof. Absolutely not, he said for the 15th time, pacing our cramped apartment like a caged animal. You are not moving into that man's house. Dad, he's dangerous, Natalie. Christ, you know what he is, what he does. He saved me. And I'm grateful, but gratitude doesn't mean you owe him your life. I stood, facing my father across the tiny living room. What life, Dad? This one? Working double shifts at the diner for tips that don't cover my rent? Watching you work yourself to death because I had to drop out of school to help support us? My voice broke. What exactly am I giving up? My father's anger crumbled. He sank onto the futon, his head in his hands. I wanted better for you, he said, his voice muffled. Your mother, she wanted you to have everything, to be safe and happy and free, not tied to some mobster? I sat beside him, taking his weathered hands in mine. Yeah, I know. But maybe this is how I get what Mom wanted. Maybe this is how I get to finish school, help you retire, have a life that isn't just survival. And if he wants more than what he's offering, men like that, they don't do charity. Then I'll deal with it. But Dad, I don't think that's what this is. I think he's lonely. I think he's terrified for his nephew. And I think maybe he sees something in me that could help. My father looked at me with eyes that had watched me grow up, that had seen me through every scraped knee and broken heart and impossible dream. You're so much like your mother, he said finally. She would have said yes too. Would have charged right in to help, consequences be damned. So what should I do? He sighed, the sound of a man surrendering to the inevitable. You're going to do what you've already decided to do. You're going to say yes. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me if things go wrong, you'll get out. I promise. I called Castellano that night. His voice when he answered carried a tension that eased the moment I spoke. I'll do it, I said. I'll take the job, but I have conditions. Name them. I finished my degree. You make that possible. Tuition, books, time to study. I want it in writing that I can leave whenever I want, for any reason, with no consequences. And I want my father taken care of. A real job, not some charity position, but something stable, with health insurance. Silence on the other end. Then, done. Anything else? Yeah. I want to meet Marco before I agree to move in. If he doesn't respond to me, if I can't help him, then we reconsider the arrangement. Fair. I could hear the smile in his voice. When can you start? How about tomorrow? I moved into the Castellano mansion on a Tuesday morning with everything I owned fitting into 2 suitcases. My suite was larger than my entire apartment had been. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting room, all decorated in soft blues and creams. There was a desk by the windows, already stocked with everything I'd need for the online classes Castellano had enrolled me in. The top university in the state, full scholarship somehow. He'd wasted no time. Antonio showed me around the house, introducing me to the staff. Rosa, the housekeeper, who ruled the kitchen with an iron fist and a soft heart. Michael, the head of security who looked like he could kill you with a soup spoon. Elena, the cook who spoke only Italian and communicated through food and gestures. They all treated me with polite deference that made me deeply uncomfortable. You'll get used to it, Antonio said. They're good people, loyal. They've served the family for years. And Marco? Where is he? Antonio's expression shuddered. Mr. Castellano is with him now. He asked that you give them an hour, then come to the library. I spent that hour unpacking and trying not to think about the magnitude of what I'd done. I'd moved into the home of one of Philadelphia's most dangerous men. I'd agreed to help raise a traumatized child I'd never met. I'd left behind everything familiar for a world I didn't understand. What the hell was I thinking? When the hour was up, I made my way to the library. The door was ajar, and I heard voices, or rather, one voice, Castellano's, low and patient. Marco, this is Natalie. She's going to be staying with us for a while. She's someone who helps people. Someone kind. I pushed the door open. The library was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books, leather chairs, warm lighting that turned everything golden. And in the center of the room, on a leather sofa, sat Vincent Castellano with a small boy curled against his side. Marco was beautiful in that way children are before the world hardens them. Dark curly hair, olive skin, enormous brown eyes that held too much knowledge for 8 years old. He looked at me with an expression that made my heart crack. Hope and fear and desperate longing all tangled together. Castellano's hand rested on the boy's shoulder, protective and gentle. "Hi, Marco," I said softly, crossing to them. "It's nice to meet you." The boy said nothing. His eyes tracked my movements, but he pressed closer to his uncle. "It's okay," I told him, settling into a chair across from them. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm not going anywhere." Something flickered across Marco's face. Then, slowly, he reached for a notebook on the coffee table, one of those black and white composition books kids use for school. He opened it and wrote something, then turned it to face me. In careful, precise letters, "Do you know sign language?" My heart squeezed. "No," I admitted, "but I can learn. Will you teach me?" For the first time since I'd entered the room, Marco smiled. It was small, tentative, but real. He wrote again. "Uncle Vinny says you're nice. Are you?" "I try to be, but you'll have to decide for yourself." Marco studied me with those old eyes. Then he wrote, "Mom was nice. She died." The bluntness of it, the simple devastation, stole my breath. Beside him, Castellano's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I'm sorry," I told Marco. "I know what that's like. My mom died too when I was little. It's the worst thing in the world." Does it stop hurting? God, what a question. I looked at Castellano, saw my own helplessness reflected in his eyes, and made a choice. "No," I said honestly. "It doesn't stop hurting. But it changes. The hurt becomes part of you instead of all of you. And you find ways to keep them close, in memories, in the things they taught you, in the love they left behind." Marco wrote, "I dream about her every night. Then I wake up and remember she's gone." Tears burned in my eyes. Yeah, me too, for a long time. "But Marco, you know what helped?" He shook his head. "Talking about her, remembering the good stuff, letting other people love me even though I was scared to let them in." I leaned forward. "You don't have to be alone in this. You've got your uncle. And now you've got me, if you want." The boy looked at Castellano, some silent communication passing between them. Then he wrote, Can I show you my room? I'd love that. Marco slipped off the couch and took my hand, his small fingers wrapping around mine with heartbreaking trust. As we left the library, I glanced back at Castellano. He was watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something fierce and tender and almost broken. Then he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. That night, after I'd seen Marco's room, filled with books and art supplies and the detritus of a childhood interrupted, after I'd helped him through dinner and watched Castellano read to him before bed, I found myself in the kitchen with Rosa. "You're good with the boy," she said, kneading dough with practiced efficiency. "He hasn't smiled like that since before his mama died." "He's a special kid." "Like his uncle was, Mr. Vincent. He was a sweet boy once, before his father made him into something else." She shook her head. "But you see glimpses of that boy still, when he's with Marco, when he looks at you." Heat crept up my neck. "He doesn't look at me any particular way." Rosa's laugh was knowing. "Child, I've worked for this family for 30 years. I've seen Mr. Vincent with many women, expensive women, beautiful women, women who wanted his power or his money or the danger he represents." She fixed me with a sharp look. "Never have I seen him look at any of them the way he looks at you." "And how is that?" "Like he's found something he didn't know he was looking for." Before I could respond, Castellano himself appeared in the doorway. "Rosa, you're spreading gossip," he said mildly. "I'm speaking truth," she shot back without fear, "and you know it." He shook his head, but there was fondness in his expression. "Natalie, could I speak with you? In my study?" My heart kicked into overdrive. "Of course." His study was different from the library, darker, more masculine, with heavy furniture and thick curtains. This was where he worked, where he made the decisions that shaped his empire. The air itself felt weighted with consequence. Castellano gestured to a leather chair and moved to pour 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "Whiskey," he said, offering me one. 25-year-old Scotch. It'll help with the nerves I can see in your shoulders." I accepted the glass, and the first sip burned beautifully down my throat. "You were incredible with Marco today," Castellano said, settling into the chair across from me. "I've been trying for 6 months to reach him. You did it in an hour." I just told him the truth. "That's why it worked." He rolled his glass between his palms. "I want to be honest with you, Natalie, about what you've walked into. What I am." "You don't have to." "I do." His eyes met mine. "You're in my home now, under my protection. You deserve to know exactly what that means." He told me then, in clinical detail, about the Castellano family business. The legitimate ventures, real estate, construction, restaurants, that fronted for the less legal ones. Protection rackets, high-end theft, gambling. Not drugs, never drugs. That was his one line, the hill his father had died on, and he would too. "I hurt people," he said flatly. "When they threaten what's mine, when they break the rules of this world we operate in, I hurt them. Sometimes I kill them. I am not a good man, Natalie. I'm just a man trying to be better than my father was, trying to give Marco a different life." "And me?" My voice was steady despite the whiskey and the weight of his confession. "What am I to you?" The question hung between us like a live wire. Castellano set down his glass and leaned forward, close enough that I could see the individual threads of silver in his hair. "You are," he said carefully, "the first person in my life who looks at me and sees something worth saving. You're the first person who makes me want to be the man Marco needs instead of the man this world made me." He paused. And if I'm being completely honest, you're the woman I think about every moment I'm not supposed to be thinking at all. My breath caught. Vincent. I know. It's insane. It's inappropriate. You work for me. You're young enough to be... He stopped himself. You're here for Marco. That's all I expect from you. The rest, whatever I feel, I'll manage. And what if I feel something too? The words escaped before I could stop them. Castellano went very still. Do you? His voice was rough. I don't know. Maybe. I'm scared and confused, and this whole situation is completely insane, but... I met his eyes. But when I'm near you, I feel safe and seen. And like maybe I could be someone more than the girl who can barely pay rent. You're already more than that. You've always been more than that. We stared at each other, the air between us crackling with possibility. Then Castellano stood abruptly, putting distance between us. You should get some rest, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Tomorrow Marco has a therapy appointment. I'd like you to come with us if you're willing. Of course. Good. Good night, Natalie. Good night. I left his study with my heart hammering and my mind spinning. What was I doing? Falling for a mob boss? Building a life in a world I didn't understand? But as I passed Marco's room and heard his soft breathing through the cracked door, as I thought about my father's call earlier, excited about his new job, one that Castellano had arranged at a legitimate company with real benefits, I knew I'd already made my choice. I was here, in this house, in this life, with these people, and I wasn't leaving. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm. Mornings with Marco, helping him with schoolwork, teaching him, and learning myself, sign language, reading together in the library. Afternoons managing the household, coordinating with Rosa and Elena and the security team, making the enormous house feel like a home. Evenings with Castellano when he was there, discussing Marco's progress, sharing meals, talking about everything and nothing. And slowly, carefully, falling deeper into something I couldn't name. Marco was blossoming, still not speaking aloud, but communicating more freely through sign language and his notebook. He laughed now, a sound that lit up Castellano's entire face. He'd started drawing again, filling pages with surprisingly sophisticated artwork. His therapist reported breakthrough after breakthrough. You're a miracle worker, Castellano said one evening as we watched Marco sketch in the library, his small face serious with concentration. I'm just giving him what he needs. Love, stability, permission to grieve. Things I couldn't give him on my own. I looked at Castellano, really looked. The man who'd seemed so dangerous that first night had revealed himself over the weeks to be something more complex. Yes, he was ruthless. Yes, he inhabited a world of violence. But he was also capable of profound gentleness, deep loyalty, and a love for his nephew that bordered on worship. You were giving him those things, I said. I'm just helping. Natalie. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. This kept happening. Moments where he'd start to say something, then pull back, building walls between us that I could feel him wanting to tear down. What? I pressed. He looked at Marco, then at me, conflict written across his face. Not here, he said finally. Later. There's something... I need to tell you something, but not in front of Marco. Fear spiked through me. Is something wrong? No. Yes. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd come to recognize. Just later. Please. After Marco went to bed, I found Castellano on the balcony off his study, staring out at the garden lit by strategically placed lights. The temperature had dropped, fall sliding toward winter, and I pulled my cardigan tighter. He turned when he heard me approach. "Derek Ashworth was arrested today," he said without preamble. "The man who drugged you. He's being charged with multiple counts of sexual assault. Turns out you weren't the first. The police found evidence, videos, photographs, trophies he kept from his victims." My stomach lurched. "How do you know this?" "Because I made sure the evidence was found. Because I had people inside the police department who owed me favors. Because I wasn't going to let him get away with what he tried to do to you." "You..." The implications crashed over me. "You manipulated an investigation." "I ensured justice was served. The evidence was real. The crimes were real. I just made sure the right people found it." I should have been horrified. Some part of me was. But the larger part, the part that had lived with the helplessness of watching Derek walk free, felt savage satisfaction. "Thank you," I said. Castellano turned to face me fully. "That's not what I needed to tell you. That's just the world I live in. The things I do to protect what's mine." "Then what?" He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and whiskey and something darker. "I'm falling in love with you," he said, the words stark and raw. "I've tried to stop. I've tried to maintain distance, to remember that you're here for Marco, that you work for me, that I'm too old and too dangerous and too fucking damaged for someone like you." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "But I can't stop, and it's becoming impossible to hide." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Vincent..." "You don't have to say anything. You don't owe me anything. If you want to leave, Antonio will drive you anywhere you want to go. If you want to stay and pretend I never said this, we can do that too. But I couldn't keep lying to you. Or to myself." I reached up and cupped his face in my hands, feeling the rasp of stubble against my palms, the tension in his jaw. "You're right," I said. "You are too old for me. You are dangerous. You are damaged." Pain flashed across his face, and he started to pull back. I held on. "But I don't care," I continued. "Because you're all so kind and protective and so fucking brave with Marco that it breaks my heart. Because you make me feel safe and valued and like I matter. Because when I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see a man trying desperately to be good despite everything the world taught him." "Natalie, I'm falling in love with you too," I whispered. "And it terrifies me." For a moment we stood frozen. Then Castellano kissed me. It was gentle at first, achingly soft, like he was afraid I'd shatter. But when I kissed him back, when I wound my arms around his neck and pulled him closer, the gentleness gave way to something fiercer. His hands spanned my waist, then slid up my back, crushing me against him. I tasted whiskey and desperation and something that felt like hope. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. "I don't know how to do this," he confessed. "How to be with someone without destroying them." "Then we'll figure it out together. Just promise me something." "Anything." "Promise me you won't shut me out. Promise me you'll let me see all of it, the violence, the darkness, the things you think will scare me away. I can't love half of you, Vincent. It's all or nothing." He pulled back to look at me, his gray eyes searching mine. "You have no idea what you're asking for." "So show me." He did. Over the following weeks and months, Castellano pulled back the curtain on his world. He brought me to meetings with his lieutenants, let me see the negotiations and threats and careful balance of power that kept his empire running. He showed me the money, the obscene amounts of cash that flowed through hidden channels. He told me about the violence, the blood on his hands, the choices that haunted him. And I stayed. Not because I approved. There were parts of his world that made me sick, that kept me up at night grappling with the ethics of loving a man who hurt people for a living. But I stayed because I could see him trying. See him steering the family business toward legitimate ventures. See him refusing hits that crossed his moral lines. See him protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. I stayed because I loved him. Fully, completely, with all his contradictions. Marco noticed the shift between us. Of course he did. Children always know. One evening, about 3 months into my time at the mansion, he wrote in his notebook, "Are you and Uncle Vinny in love?" My face went hot. "What makes you think that?" "The way you look at each other. The way he smiles now. The way you're happy." He paused, then added, "It's okay. I like it. Mom would have liked it too." That night, I cried in Castellano's arms, overwhelmed by the weight of Marco's blessing and the ghost of his mother's. "He's right," Castellano murmured into my hair as we lay tangled together in his bed. "Gabriella would have loved you. She would have said you were exactly what I needed. Someone who could see past the bullshit to the man underneath." "Tell me about her," I said. "Really tell me. Not just the tragedy, but who she was." So he did. And as he talked about his little sister who'd been afraid of nothing, who'd defied their father to study art, who'd fallen in love with a poor musician and married him despite the family's objections, I felt her ghost settle more peacefully around us. The world outside the mansion continued turning. I finished my first semester of classes with straight A's. My father took to his new job like he'd been born to it, his weekly calls filled with an energy I hadn't heard in years. The Castellano family continued its slow, careful transition toward legitimacy, and through it all, we built something fragile and fierce. A family cobbled together from loss and luck and love. Then, 6 months after I'd moved in, Antonio knocked on my door at 2 a.m. "Miss Brennan," he said, his face grave. "We have a situation." I was in Castellano's study 5 minutes later, wrapped in a robe, my heart hammering. Vincent stood by his desk, his face carved from stone. Around him, his top men, Antonio, Michael, and 2 others I recognized as his most trusted lieutenants. "What's wrong?" I asked. "My cousin," Castellano said, his voice deadly calm. "Carlo Castellano. He's decided he wants control of the family business. And he's decided the best way to get it is to eliminate obstacles." Ice flooded my veins. "Marco." "And you." His eyes met mine. "There was an attempt tonight. They tried to breach the property. Michael's team stopped them, but..." His jaw tightened. "Carlo knows about you, about what you mean to me. He's going to use that." "Then I'll leave. I'll take Marco somewhere safe." "No." The word was absolute. "You're not leaving. You're not giving up your life because my family is poison." He crossed to me, gripping my shoulders. "I will handle Carlo, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" I looked at the man I loved, the man who'd saved me, who'd given me a home and a purpose and a family, and made my choice. "What do you need me to do?" What followed was 3 weeks of carefully orchestrated chaos. Castellano moved Marco and me to a safe house, a fortress of a property guarded by armed men around the clock. He moved against Carlo with surgical precision, cutting off his money, turning his allies, systematically dismantling everything his cousin had built. I watched the man I loved become someone colder, harder, more dangerous than I'd ever seen. Watched him make decisions I didn't want to know about, come home with blood on his knuckles and murder in his eyes. And I was there every time he came back, pulling him into the shower, washing away the evidence, holding him when the weight became too much. "You shouldn't have to see this," he said one night, his voice raw with exhaustion. "You shouldn't have to touch me when I'm like this." "Like what? Human? Protecting what's yours?" I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. "You think I don't know what you're doing? You think I don't understand that every drop of blood on your hands is there because you're keeping us safe? That doesn't make it right." "No, but it makes it necessary. And I'm not leaving you to carry this alone." The final confrontation came on a Tuesday night. Carlo had been backed into a corner, his empire crumbling, his allies scattered. He had one card left to play. He kidnapped Rosa, the housekeeper who'd been with the family for 30 years, who'd raised Castellano and his sister, who loved Marco like her own grandson. The message was clear: surrender control or watch another person you love die. Castellano's response was equally clear. He went to meet Carlo alone, against every protestation from his men, from me, from everyone who loved him. He walked into a warehouse on the Philadelphia docks with nothing but the clothes on his back and the ice-cold certainty in his eyes. I wasn't supposed to follow. I'd promised to stay at the safe house with Marco. I broke that promise. Antonio drove me there. He understood better than anyone that sometimes love means being present for the darkness. We stayed back, watching from a distance as Castellano entered the warehouse, watching as gunfire erupted, watching as men I didn't recognize ran from the building, scattering into the night. Then silence. Eternal, horrible silence. I was out of the car before Antonio could stop me, running toward the warehouse, my heart in my throat. He caught me at the door. "Let me go first," he said. "Please, Miss Brennan." He went in with his gun drawn. I followed anyway. The warehouse was a slaughterhouse. Bodies, I didn't count, didn't want to know, scattered across the concrete floor. And in the center of it all, Vincent Castellano knelt beside Rosa's chair, cutting through the ropes that bound her. He was covered in blood, soaked in it, but moving, breathing, alive. Rosa was crying, her weathered hands cupping his face, speaking rapid Italian I couldn't follow, but I understood the tone. Relief, gratitude, love. Then Castellano looked up and saw me. The expression on his face, devastation and fury and desperate relief, made my knees weak. "I told you to stay at the safe house," he said. "I don't take orders well." He stood, leaving Rosa to Antonio's care, and crossed to me. Up close, I could see that most of the blood wasn't his, could see the fire in his eyes that said the monster had been let off its leash and was still prowling beneath the surface. "You shouldn't see me like this," he said, his voice rough. "I've seen you 100 different ways, Vincent. This is just one more." I reached up to touch his face, not caring about the blood. "Is it done? Is Carlo dead, along with everyone who stood with him against family?" He closed his eyes. I tried to give him a chance, tried to offer him exile, a way out that didn't end in blood. He chose this. "Then it's over. It's over." I pulled him into my arms and he collapsed against me. This man who'd just killed to protect his family, who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, who loved so fiercely it destroyed anyone who threatened that love. "Let's go home," I whispered. Marco will be worried. Home. The words seemed to anchor him. He pulled back, nodded, and together we walked out of that warehouse into the cool Philadelphia night. Marco was waiting when we returned to the mansion, having been brought back by the security team. He took one look at his uncle, cleaned up now, but still carrying the weight of the night, and launched himself into Castellano's arms. "I knew you'd come back," Marco signed, his hands flying. "I knew you'd win." "Always," Castellano signed back, his movements careful despite their precision. "I'll always come back to you." Marco looked at me over his uncle's shoulder and signed, "To both of you." 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in spring, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of laughter from the garden below. I padded to the balcony and looked down to see Marco and Castellano playing catch, the boy's face lit up with joy. As if sensing my presence, Castellano looked up. When he saw me, he smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face, that made him look years younger, that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with him. He'd asked me to marry him a week ago. Simple, direct, in the middle of dinner with Marco. Be my wife. Be Marco's mother. Be part of this family in every way that matters. I'd said yes before he finished the question. Now, watching them play, I pressed my hand to my stomach where our daughter grew, a secret I'd learned just yesterday, one I'd tell him tonight. I thought about the path that had led me here. A terrifying date, a text to my father, a dangerous man stepping in when no one else would. I thought about how one moment could change everything, how love could bloom in the darkest places, how family wasn't always blood, but always choice. Marco spotted me and waved, signing, "Come play with us." I signed back, 5 minutes. But Castellano was already moving toward the house, toward me, his eyes full of promises and plans and a future we'd build together. He took the stairs 2 at a time and swept me into his arms on the balcony, kissing me until I forgot how to breathe. "Good morning, Mrs. Castellano-to-be," he murmured against my lips. "Good morning, Mr. Castellano. I love you. I love you too." Below us, Marco made exaggerated gagging sounds, and we broke apart laughing. Castellano took my hand, lacing our fingers together, and led me downstairs to the garden where our son waited, where our family, cobbled together from violence and rescued by love, would spend a perfect spring morning doing nothing more dangerous than throwing a ball and being happy. And as I watched my husband-to-be teach our son to catch, as I felt the tiny life growing inside me, I understood something fundamental. Sometimes, the darkest beginning leads to the brightest end. Sometimes, the most dangerous man is exactly the salvation you need. Sometimes, a text message really does save your life, and everything that comes after.